Hello, everyone, and many thanks for joining this stream. And of course, many thanks to all the members of our community who will join later on or will watch this stream in later on as a video. Today is, of course, 30th of May. Now it's 11 o'clock in the morning Moscow time, and I have prepared quite a number of news on some major important developments, and I hope you will find this episode informative and useful. Although, dear friends, before I start, let me address one topic. Number of members of our community yesterday, day before yesterday, were sharing with me their opinion about my streams. They were pointing out that I was a bit tense last 2 days, which is true, by the way. And I appreciate this feedback. I always welcome recommendations or their even critique, by the way. It's a useful stuff for sure. So thank you. I want to thank members of our community who expressed their opinions, and I accept fully that. Well, I was a bit tense because I was very angry, by the way. I mean, what can I say? When Trump, a couple of days ago, started making very strong statements, aggressive statements towards Russia, Russian president, Russian people, of course, it did make me angry. And you could see it because I'm not an actor, dear friends, and I never pretend to be actor, right? All I did promise from the beginning that I will be real always, and I'm gonna keep my promise, right? But nevertheless, I'll definitely try to be a bit relaxed, because that way live streams will be easier to digest, I guess. So I wanted to highlight that a moment. And so that's being said, I just remind you, dear friends, before I start the news segment, that during the stream you can send a question or the comment through my PayPal or Boosty platforms, or you can send a super chat through Rumble, where my channel is monetized. And after news segment, I will react on your question or the comment if you want to highlight any topic, really. And so, yes, that's being said, let's start this live stream now, news segment of it. And first news that I want to share with you is this report from RIA Novosti that air defense systems on duty intercepted 27 drones over the Russian regions during the previous night, early hours of this morning. And little more specifics here: 15 drones were intercepted over the Belgorod region and 12 drones over the Kursk region. Last night, this morning, seems like there was no attacks on Moscow. That was taking place on regular basis almost whole a week. Also, we have RIA Novosti's report that Russian Defense Ministry confirmed the progress of the Russian armed forces in a number of directions and liberation of several settlements. To be more precise, Russian troops liberated Stroyevka settlement, also in the Kharkov region, by the way, Shevchenko, Первое settlement, and Gnatovka settlement in DPR. And let me show you on the map where these settlements are located. So let's start with the Kharkov region first. Stroyevka settlement is here, right on the border with the Russian Federation. And clearly, as the Russian president stated a couple of days ago, Russian troops are creating a buffer zone, and they cross the border with the Sumy region and clear up territory in Stroyevka and their surrounding areas from enemy forces. When it comes to Kharkov region, by the way, Russian troops are also quite successfully conducting local-scale offensive operations in Volchansk area. And according to some reports, northern part of Volchansk is under full Russian control now, which is, I will say, quite significant development. For quite a while, there was no much reports about situation in Volchansk. It was a sort of operational pause there, but lately Russian troops become quite active in that direction also. And when it comes to other two settlements that Russian Defense Ministry confirmed as liberated, Gnatovka is here on northern eastern flank of Pokrovsk-Mirnograd agglomeration, and this is the Shevchenko-Pervoye settlement. This area, also northern eastern flank of Pokrovsk-Mirnograd agglomeration. And if you take a look at Pokrovsk itself, by the way, clearly this pincer is moving forward, pincer that Russian armed forces creating around Pokrovsk and Mirnograd, and I guess on the current speed of advance, maybe it will take another month or two, and eventually both these cities, garrisons of Kiev regime in these cities will be encircled. They will end up at least in operational encirclement, and probably they will flee towns before get completely encircled. Right? Progress is visible, significant, and don't be surprised by this if you are new to this channel and to alternative media, and before now only were receiving news from Western MSM, because in that case, of course, you would probably think that there is a stalemate and nothing is happening, no movements on the ground, which is false information that West is pushing, by the way. In reality, Russian troops are advancing literally on daily basis. Okay, that's being said, let's go through some other news now. And of course, nowadays, many people that pay any attention to Ukrainian crisis are talking about upcoming Istanbul summit, or not summit, but direct talks between Moscow and Kyiv that will take place on 2nd of June, as it was announced by Russian officials. And we have a statement of press spokesman of the Russian president, Dmitry Peskov, who is saying that basically Kyiv regime did not yet responded in any way about sending its delegation in Istanbul for these talks. Let's go for little details through this news. Russia has not yet received consent from Ukraine to hold their second round of talks in Istanbul on June 2nd. Russian presidential press secretary Dmitry Peskov stated the Kremlin announced that their proposal for a meeting in Istanbul has so far remained unanswered, and the new date has not been agreed upon. TASS reports Peskov explained that as far as he knows, Kyiv has not provided an official response on this initiative, although Russian side was very clear that the Russian delegation is ready to be in Istanbul on 2nd of June, and I believe even Western allies of this terrorist regime of Zelensky also stated, first of all, US also stated that they are in support of this idea of conducting second round of talks in Istanbul. Although Kyiv regime may actually derail these talks because globalists, we know, globalists are not happy with these talks. Globalists don't want no de-escalation. They want a further prolongation of this proxy war. Although they constantly talk about some 30-day ceasefire, which might create some confusion among a number of people. And they might think that West is actually for peace, but in reality, no. All these talks about 30-day ceasefire is attempt of globalists and their controlled regimes in Europe, first of all, UK, France, Germany, and others, to give some break to their proxy terrorist regime in Kiev. That's all it is, right? It's not about peace. And Kiev regime, in its attempt to somewhat derail this talks in Istanbul, is making some statements now that Russia should publish its memorandum before talks will take place. Otherwise, there are some statements made in Kiev that they might just simply don't go in Istanbul if this decision depends on them. I mean, decision will depend on position of globalists and their regimes, London, Paris, Berlin, and also US, by the way, also on the position of Washington. But Kremlin nevertheless responded on these demands from Kiev that the Russian memorandum should be disclosed before talks will take place. And we have reaction from Kremlin, and the reaction is that Moscow refuses to disclose Russia's terms for a ceasefire. So we have a quote from press spokesman of the Russian president, Dmitry Peskov, who is saying that we will not publicly discuss the content of the projects that are being exchanged. He means memorandums that was exchanged between Moscow and Kiev, because all negotiations must be conducted in a closed, not a public mode. The main thing now is to continue this process of direct Russia-Ukrainian negotiations, and it has been proposed to do this on Monday in Istanbul on 2nd of May. So this is Moscow's position. I don't think in next couple of days this position will change. So therefore, Russian memorandum not going to be published, and Kiev regime will see this memorandum and will have opportunity to discuss key points of this memorandum during the talks. That's why these talks being arranged, right? So let the delegations meet each other, exchange their opinions on certain topics, and maybe they will come up with, maybe they will find some common ground, although I'm skeptical of that, but still, right? And it is better for Kiev regime to basically accept whatever terms Russia has, because, for example, for many reasons, by the way, and it's not just me that's saying this, but also permanent representative of Russian Federation in UN is commenting on that. So Ukraine needs to choose peace through negotiations or inevitable defeat. Ukraine has to choose between peace through current negotiations or inevitable defeat if Kiev will choose otherwise. Russian permanent representative to the UN, Vasily Nebezhny, stated at the meeting of United Nations Security Council, and of course Nebezhny is correct, absolutely correct. Either Kiev regime will accept Russian terms now, or Kiev regime will accept Russian terms little late, and these terms gonna be much more strong, right? That's how it's gonna be. And if Kiev regime continues, and the globalists, by the way, longer they continue these games and messing around, then Russian terms become more and more drastic, and eventually Moscow might even say, you know what, we tried. You did not appreciate our attempt to reach the peace, so therefore, okay, we will continue now, and that's most likely what is going to happen. Special military operation will continue, and would not stop until Russian troops will reach either borders of Western Ukraine or maybe even borders of Poland, Hungary, and Romania, Slovakia. That's how it's going to be, by the way, right? And in that case, of course, there's going to be no more Ukraine on the political map. So Nebezhny definitely has a point when he's saying that, you know what, Kiev regime, choose. Either you accept Russian terms now, or you will face much more difficult for you decisions later on. Would Kiev regime listen to Russian recommendations? Of course they would not, because yet again, Zelensky and his criminal associates decide nothing. The decision-making process is completely on Washington, London, Paris, partially on Berlin. Obviously, globalist forces, neocon forces, they are allies in this particular situation, and they will decide what Kiev's response is going to be. But meanwhile, seems like Professor Jeffrey Sachs, that all of us are familiar with whom, is agrees with seems like my take on the situation, and also with Nebezhny, because he said that Ukraine is going to lose Odessa unless it makes peace now. Let's go through some details of Sachs' statements. Ukraine risks losing its Black Sea coast, including the city of Odessa, unless it agrees to peace deal right now. Jeffrey Sachs, American economist and director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University in New York, said in an interview with the TASS news agency. We have a quote from Jeffrey Sachs. If in fact the war continues because essentially Ukraine does not make peace, does not want to make a peace, and the US President Donald Trump basically fails into line with the prevailing view that the West should continue to fight Russia, my guess is that Ukraine would lose not only a lot more lives, but also a lot more territory in the end. So it could end up being completely defeated. It could end up losing its Black Sea coast, Odessa, and a lot of the rest. He pointed out, and he's absolutely correct. Although, by the way, I have to notice that, I'm not a professor, not an expert in anything really. I just spent the last 30 years of my life in the journalism field, right? And that's all, right? But nevertheless, I was saying from very beginning, isn't it? And veterans of our community can confirm that once this conflict will end, either Ukraine as a state, quasi-state, will cease to exist on the political map, or will remain on the political map only in the territories of Kiev and surrounding couple of regions, max, and even then exclusively in Russian sphere of interests, in Russian zone of interest, right? Completely free of the Western ruling class. And seems like Jeffrey Sachs is somewhat on the same page now. I don't know what he was thinking 3 years ago. My position, my take on the big picture did not change even slightest. But now he's clearly on, saying somewhat same stuff that I was saying since forever. So interesting, isn't it? Interesting. And by the way, of course, it's obvious that in a most optimistic scenario for Kyiv, in the most optimistic scenario for Kyiv regime or the collective West, Russia will liberate at least from Kharkiv to Odessa anyways. It's not even question. One way or another, through military means or through referendums and so on, Russia will liberate more territories on this former Soviet republic, and for sure Kharkov region, Dnipropetrovsk region, Nikolaev region, and Odessa region, most likely Sumy and Chernigov regions, and Poltava region, maybe some more, right? But from Kharkov to Odessa, all this territory, this historical Russian land where Russian speakers and Russian people basically are living, will be liberated, for sure. And this is a most optimistic scenario for the West, because otherwise, as I already said, if globalists continue to mess around, then Russian forces will continue their advances and will stop only either on the border with the Western Ukraine or on the border with the Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and Romania. So globalists can choose which way they want things to go. And by the way, Kat Kellogg, neocon and ally of globalists, was interviewed once again, and he went to say some, he went to make quite a few statements, and among them, he said that NATO may stop expanding to Russian borders, which is funny to hear at this point, because where are you gonna expand, right? Where else you gonna expand? You already expanded as much as you could. Ukraine was, Belarus was never questioned in question, right? Collective West globalists tried to conduct a color revolution in Belarus. They failed miserably, right? So Belarus was out of question, but they tried to establish full control over the Ukraine, and they were already building military infrastructure there, even though Ukraine formally was not NATO member, right? And eventually, because of these provocative actions of the NATO, collective Western countries because of the coup d'etat that they orchestrated in Kiev in 2014, and then provoked civil war in the country. Eventually, Russia intervened, and as I said, now this topic, by the way, that Kellogg is making is senseless, right? We don't really care. First of all, we are not trusting, right, to anything that comes out from collective West, and definitely not. We are not trusting statements from U.S. neocons, right? But that's even not that important at this point, because NATO not gonna expand anywhere further than maximum Western Ukraine, which eventually most likely will be claimed by Poland, Hungary, and Romania. Right? The rest of the territory is out of question anyway. So this statement of Kellogg is just, too late, really, to be made. Globalist Western ruling class, if they did not want it to go down this badly that they are doing right now and will continue to do, they should stop expanding NATO after unification of Germany, because they expanded NATO then, right? Eastern Germany become fully incorporated into NATO, and they should stop there and then, but they did not, right? And now it's just too late, man. You've incorporated almost all the territory, including formally neutral before Finland and Sweden. So where else are you gonna go? I mean, only way you can get any closer to Russia is to bring Japan into NATO, but Japan is already your unofficial member, right? So it is what it is. But nevertheless, it is interesting that even neocons are acknowledging the topic of NATO's expansion was a big topic, and they should listen to Russian concerns. And they are acknowledging that, yes, NATO's expansion was a serious security risk for Russia, and Russia had all legal and every other reasons to be concerned about it. Anyways, let's continue. And Novosti is reporting that US worries of imposing new sanctions against Russia, which is quite interesting. Things like with these threats towards Russia, they scared themselves much more than anyone else, right? And I'm talking about 500% tariffs, by the way, that US Senate has proposed on the countries that are cooperating with Russia. And I mean, which countries are closest economical partners for Russia, isn't it? It's China, India, even Turkey, by the way, which is a NATO member state. And I mean, when true experts in economy look at this bill that is being drafted in Senate, they were horrified, right? Because last thing they want is 500% tariffs on China and India, or any other country, by the way, that cooperates with Russia. Right? But anyways, let's go through this news. US authorities are concerned about the global consequences of new sanctions against Russia, and are wary of secondary sanctions that could harm their relations with the partners and national interests, obviously, writes their Atlantic magazine. Earlier, the Wall Street Journal reported that US President Donald Trump is considering imposing sanctions against Russia this week. The publication recalls the existence of a bill by US Senator Lindsey Graham, listed as a terrorist and extremist in the Russian Federation, by the way, so that you know, this Lindsey Graham. And there are additional sanctions against Russia are proposing that bill, but the White House is concerned about the global rise in gas prices if tough measures are introduced. Some in their administration are also wary of secondary sanctions that could anger US trade partners who buy Russian energy resources, including China and India, the publication said. Well, interesting. As I said, man, they scared themselves with these threats towards Russia and Russia's allies more than anyone else. And as I said in in previous updates, you know what? I think it would be better for this world if US will go ahead and introduce these sanctions, right? 500% tariffs on Russian partners, because Russian partners will do okay, right? But I would not say same about US, and that step from Washington will further accelerate this unstoppable at this point process of isolating collective West from rest of the world, which is absolutely necessary, because humanity have to teach some lessons to globalists, right? To so-called elites of the Western world, and they have to be put in their place. And one way to do this is to isolate collective West, right, while leaving door open for migration of people, hardworking, law-obeying people from the collective West countries that want to escape this horror that collective West is becoming more extensively, right? And in my personal opinion, Russia definitely should leave doors open for migration from collective West countries, because it will be beneficial. It's a win-win situation. It's going to benefit migrants from the Western countries, because they want to find a place to live where normality is welcomed, right? And Russia needs more people. As simple as that. Russia needs more people, right? So that's the way to go, really. And I think if Washington will go ahead with these additional sanctions, that might accelerate this process of isolation of the collective West, and eventually that might benefit humanity as a whole, because as I said, man, Western so-called elites have to be put in their place, because they are at this point they are existential threat for humanity. It is what it is. And before I continue, dear friends, let me notice that this media project is completely subscriber funded. And if you like my work, if you like my channels, please consider to support. Please consider to help me to maintain this project and continue to work on these channels full time. You can support through several means. You can donate through PayPal platform or Boosty platform, if you can. You can subscribe to my Patreon page, which will be also a great support, of course. And if you ask me, I would prefer more people to subscribe to my Patreon and become sponsors for this project, because Patreon or channel on Boosty, by the way, because that allows me to know approximate sums that I'm working with for the next months. While with donations, you just never know. Week might go like there will be no donation for a project, or another week might be different. With donations, you just never know. And Boosty and Patreon are very helpful in this regard, that you have more or less good understanding about funds that you have to continue this work. And what else? I mean, you can, as I said during the live streams, by the way, you can donate through Rumble channel. You can use Super Chat or Rant feature there. And you can become premium subscriber on Rumble too. That will be obviously great support and assistance. And crypto, yes, if you are good with crypto, you can support with crypto too. All the links are under this video and under every other video in the description box and in the pinned comment. That's being said, dear friends, let's continue with some other news now. And well, Middle East, of course, is in the center of world's attention. And RIA Novosti and many other media outlets reported that Hamas and Israel agreed to the truce. According to media, there are some other reports that Hamas did not yet officially confirm that they are agree on this truce, but hopefully, we will see some de-escalation in this area. So the Palestinian report itself is that Palestinian movement Hamas and Israel have agreed to conclude a 60-day truce in Gaza Strip Al Arabiya TV channel reports, citing sources, Hamas and Israel have agreed to truce, according to a statement of that source. This media outlet also reports that U.S. Special Envoy for Middle East, Steve Witkoff, was notified of the parties' agreement to a ceasefire, and there are many media outlets are calling this, excuse me, calling this achievement, if sides really will agree on a truce, calling this achievement of Witkoff, because he was engaged in talks with both sides, and if peace will be achieved, or truce will be achieved, of course, we can count that as another success on behalf of Witkoff and his diplomatic work. He is definitely one of the very few members of Trump's administration that can be seen as somewhat successful in his position. I wouldn't say anything like that about any other official of public, at least highly public officials of Trump's administration. Meanwhile, Iran, of course, Iran's nuclear program is also in a center of attention. And we have this report from TASS news agency that Iran's foreign minister denies their nuclear deal with the US is close. Earlier, some media outlets, based on some sources, I mean, this is a standard nowadays, isn't it? That all the media outlets are referring to some sources, and we just never know. Do they really have source, or they just are, lying about it? But that's the reality that we are dealing with, isn't it? So, number of media outlets, Western media outlets, based on their sources, reported that their sides, US and Iran, are kind of close to achieve some deal. And the foreign minister of Iran went to say that this is not really the truth. So, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi said their country is still far. Countries, US and Iran, are still far from concluding a deal that would settle differences over their Iranian nuclear program. Media is speculating about an imminent Iran-US deal. Not sure if we are there yet. Abbas Araghchi stated, although at least formally talks continue between the sides. And what is also interesting, yesterday, number of sources, including Axios, reported that Gulf leaders reportedly convinced Trump not to strike Iran and consider a deal. So Saudi Arabia, UAE, and other Gulf states opposed nuclear deal in 2015, but now they are among the most enthusiastic supporters of the diplomacy, which is understandable, by the way. They know perfectly well that if US and Israel and number of their allies will attack Iran, that will kill navigation straight away in the Persian Gulf and through Hormuz Strait, which means that these Gulf countries will be basically isolated, right? They would not be able to sell their resources, oil and gas, and that would be a huge hit on these countries. Nothing to be said about deterioration and even potentially huge escalation in relationships between these Arab Gulf countries and Iran, if regional war is provoked and if Iran is attacked, because obviously US and its allies, Israel and so on, will try to use their leverage over these countries to force them to allow these military forces of US and anti-Iranian coalition to use at least airspace of these Gulf countries and their military bases there to conduct strikes on Iran. And Iran already said that they will retaliate on any country that will assist in any way, shape, or form any attack on the country, right? So it is absolutely understandable that Gulf Arab states are opposing now escalation with Iran, and are trying to persuade Washington to prioritize peace, but I'm afraid the influence that Gulf states have is not comparable with the influence that Israel or Israeli lobby has in Washington, right? So therefore, if you ask me, I would tell you that 99%, in my personal opinion, it's only a matter of time, and then U.S. And Israel and a number of other countries will attack Iran. It seems inevitable in my reading of the big picture. And I explain reasoning behind it, by the way. Some might think that U.S. will attack Iran because of their Israeli lobby, which is true. That is one reason. But I think there is a much bigger play in this regards, because globalists and neocons, by the way, are united in their hatred of China, right? Globalists and neocons are united in their hatred towards China, and they know, and at least that's what their plan is, if I'm reading big picture correctly, that they want to provoke regional war in the Middle East and shut down navigation through Persian Gulf and the Hormuz Strait, because they want to strike China's economy big time. And they will manage to do so because China is one of the main importers of energy from Middle East. That's what it is, dear friends. And that's why I think and this strategy of globalists and neocons goes even further than that. Eventually, what they want is to China to become extremely dependent on Russia. China is already dependent in some sense from energy supplies from Russia. But if Middle East is cut off then from China, then obviously Chinese dependence on Russian energy will become tremendous, right? It will reach strategical level, even higher than that, if there is anything higher than that. And I think globalists want this to happen, globalists and neocons, because their hope is that at some point they will manage to create some tensions between Russia and China, and they will force China to go offensive, to escalate with Russia, basically, including militarily. That's what their hope is, and they will, in their dreams, neutralize two main competitors on a global scale, on a geopolitical scale, China and Russia. That's their game plan, by the way. That's the game plan of globalists, right? And the neocons. And that's why I'm saying that 99%, in my personal opinion, it's not matter of if, but it's matter of when US and Israel and other countries from anti-Iranian coalition will attack Iran. And Tehran knows this, by the way. Officials in Iran know this, seems like quite well, and are preparing for such development. And for example, I shared yesterday on my Telegram and Twitter X page this news yesterday, that Iran commander fires a biggest threat yet to potential enemies. He said, our fighters are on the trigger. We assume we will be engaged in a great battle with a great power. Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Major General Salami stated. So they know, they are saying it openly, that even though talks are taking place and Tehran really tries and wants to de-escalate, right, with US and with the rest of their collective West countries, they know perfectly well that the US is just playing the games. US is, or Trump's administration is not an honest actor in this negotiation. They're just gaining time, right? And if Iran's diplomats are diplomatic in their statements, then, well, leadership of Iran's military and security services have no obligation to be diplomatic, and they are saying it openly that they believe they will be engaged in a great battle with a great power, and and their fingers are on the trigger. So unfortunately, most likely, regional war is inevitable in the Middle East for reasons that at least partially I did explain just a minute ago. Meanwhile, RT is reporting that US court, by the way, yesterday was quite a day in US. So at one point, US court blocked Trump's tariffs, and later on, another court actually reinstated Trump's tariffs. I mean, it's a circus, right? What is going on in US, by the way? This is not the optics that US society, US public probably would appreciate, right? But it is what it is. So a US Court of International Trade has ruled that President Donald Trump has no right to impose sweeping tariffs on imports under the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act. By invoking the legislation, the White House bypassed the need for congressional approval that would otherwise have been required to take such steps. And after this ruling, by the way, it only took like several hours, right? And this news emerged that Trump's tariffs were reinstated. So the US Federal Appeals Court has temporarily reinstated President Donald Trump's global tariffs, halting an earlier ruling that had blocked their import duties and found that the White House had exceeded its authorities. So, I mean, you tell me, dear friends, what's happening in US? This clown show has to end, man. This is not the way that a serious country, one of the major nuclear superpowers should act really and present itself, right? But anyways, by the way, if even Trump's tariffs was not reinstated, Trump's officials or US officials were saying that they will find a way to introduce tariffs anyways. So therefore, I guess they will use any gap in legislation to use it to basically continue further implement these policies of Trump that is at least theoretically intended to incentivize businesses worldwide, especially in the collective West countries, and more specifically in Europe, to move their manufacturing capabilities into US. But will it work in reality? Who knows? I mean, only time will tell. From what I read on this matter, experts are kind of divided. Some say this might work actually. Others say it would not. I don't know. Time will tell. And also interesting news that US sanctioned tankers, by the way, oil tankers, start transporting Russian oil to India, according to Bloomberg. And I did share this information also on my Telegram and Twitter X page because I think it is interesting, isn't it? This highlights this information, close ties, strategical partnership, actually, between Russia and India, which cannot be derailed, by the way. Not by US, not by EU, not by no one. Russia and India are strategical partners forever. This is not some situational partnership that we are, seeing time and again in different parts of this world, right? This is a long-standing strategical partnership, and it cannot be broken, no matter how hard number of countries gonna try, right? And so last week, for example, about 1 million barrels of so-called crude from Russia's Far East were delivered to Indian refineries. Also, claims are that more sanctioned vessels are due to deliver their cargoes next months. So that's what is happening about these sanctions that US and other, US, UK, other countries in the collective West, EU is introducing These sanctions, all they do is further accelerate isolation of the collectivist countries from the rest of the world. That's all it is. Because it's not up to Washington, not up to London or Brussels or some other capitals to intervene in relationships between Moscow and Delhi, between Moscow and Beijing, between Moscow and any other capital in global South, in Africa, in Latin America. This is our business, not the business of US or EU, right? Or the UK. And this kind of informations are clearly demonstrating that, isn't it? That's why I did share this news. What else do I have? Sport, by the way. I very rarely talk about sport, but I think this information is worth our attention for sure. A legendary hockey player, by the way, who is basically, in hockey terms, he is Messi and Ronaldo combined, right? And we all know Messi and Ronaldo, I mean, in last decades, they were major superstars in football, right? So Ovechkin's NHL career and their date is announced. So Russian hockey player Alexander Ovechkin will spend his last season in the NHL in 2025-2026. The Washington club informed its fans about this. So their 2025-2026 season will be the Alexander Ovechkin's final season in the National Hockey League. Thus reports journalist Jacob Billington reported on their X social network also that the Washington Capitals club notified season ticket holders about their upcoming end of the Russians' performance in the league. The later two subscribers stated that the next season will be Ovechkin's last as a part of Washington. So yes, I mean, for Washington, this is this is going to be end of entire era, isn't it? Ovechkin is highest scorer ever in NHL's history, and one day someone probably will beat his record. That's why records are created, to be eventually the overrun, but it will probably take very, very long time. As it took very long time, by the way, previous record of great Gretzky to be beaten by Ovechkin. And reports are, dear friends, that after ending his career in Washington, Ovechkin will come back to Russian team, his own team here in Russia, which is Dynamo Moscow. And probably he will play in Dynamo Moscow for several seasons and make hockey fans happy. Here in Russia and worldwide, he's going to be in spotlight for forever now, right? He is the legend, by the way, living legend. That's how it is. So good luck to Ovechkin, and hopefully he will score additional, I don't know, dozens and dozens and dozens of goals in his last season in Washington, and he will continue do so in Moscow, in Dynamo Moscow. And dear friends, I want to end this update on this news that I saw this morning, right before I started this live stream. If you are wondering about rating of Russian president or the government, I have latest information on that here. So the level of trust in President Vladimir Putin among the Russian public stands at 81%, while 82% of respondents approve his job performance. Survey conducted by the Public Opinion Foundation FOM showed. The poll carried out between May 23rd and 25 served 1,500 respondents when asked directly from different fields of life, by the way, different ages and so on. It's a standard stuff. So when asked directly if they trust Putin, 81% of the participants responded affirmatively, 1% decrease in a week. The majority also endorsed of president's job performance, 82%. The survey said, also interesting news, that total of 57% those polled said they approved the Russian government's handling of their country, 1% increase compared to previous such a study, while 61% approved of Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin's performance, 3% increase, which is also interesting information, isn't it? By the way, I would agree. With these numbers. By the way, am I 100% okay with the job that Russian president does? No, but would I say that he's done a great job for Russia? 100%, right? So I'm definitely among these 82% of people, even though I did not vote for Putin, by the way. I'm not his supporter in terms of policies. I mean, political support, right? I'm not supporting his party. But nevertheless, let's be real here. I'm definitely among this majority who said that president's job performance is quite good, and it is good, by the way. I mean, what can I say? He's done quite a good job for Russia, man. Especially if you take in account where this country was in 90s and where Russia is right now. I mean, it's two different universes, right? That's how massive the change is, right? So therefore, I understand absolutely that vast majority of public supports Putin, and vast majority, even more people, appreciate his work and think that he is doing a good job. And when it comes to government, by the way, I will say that I would agree with the majority also, with this 61%, that Mikhail Mishustin, prime minister, is doing quite a good job. And I'm even impressed, by the way, with his job and with job of especially economical bloc of Russian government, because I mean they did good work, by the way, to make sure that Russian economy would withstand this tremendous pressure that collective West impose, and they succeed. Russian economy is succeeding, and well, approval rating says it all, isn't it? Majority of society is positive about their work. And there are also additional information. Support for the ruling United Russia Party fell by 2% to 46%. Support for the Communist Party of the Russian Federation rose by 1% up to 8%, while support for the Liberal Democratic Party of Russia remained at the 10%. The Just Russia for Truth Party support had steady at 3%, while support for the New People's Party increased by 1% up to 2%. These are parliamentary parties, by the way. There is, I don't know, dozens and dozens of more parties here in Russia, but this is parliamentary parties. And if you ask me which one would I support from these parties, most likely none. I mean, if tomorrow was parliamentary elections, I probably would not go, as I did not go during the presidential elections, by the way. But I mean, if I have to vote, if I have to choose from these parties, I would maybe prefer this New People's Party, because this is a new party, new energy, relatively new party, by the way, and quite successful. They are already in the parliament, and sometimes I come across some statements of the members of this party, and not always, but quite often I find their takes reasonable, and they are new political force, right, here in Russia, and I would give them a chance, for example. But for other parties, I would definitely don't vote. My personal take, by the way, on that. Anyways, I guess this is all for news segment, right? hopefully you find this episode informative and useful. And was there any? Oh, there was a donation on a PayPal. Uh, I'm not gonna say name. Sorry, dear friends. Where? Yeah, but I mean, Nathan. I'm not gonna say full name for God's sake. No, it's my wife is informing me that there was a donation on PayPal. Nathan, thank you very much for your donation. But I want to be careful. If you write down nickname or during their donations or otherwise, I feel more free to say the name. There was a donation on Rumble Super Chat. Thank you, D2 Tidre7 for $2 donation. And the question is that do you think that Russia will in the near future be forced to intervene again in Syria if the new regime gets too out of control, along with Israel overstepping military boundaries? Well, dear friend, probably you know that recently there was attacks on Russian Khmeimim base. I reported about it. In my previous updates, and theoretically speaking, if Marco Rubio's recent statement becomes true and Syria will end up in full-scale civil war, in that case, Russian militaries might have no choice but to get involved in some ways to protect civilians, at least around in areas where Russian military bases are located, as they did, by the way, about 2 months ago when radicals, extremists, and the terrorists start terrorizing people in Latakia province. Thousands and thousands of civilians find shelter in Russian military bases, and if situation will demand activity, concrete steps from Russian side to protect more civilians, of course, Russian militaries will do this. But Russian military is not gonna take sides, I guess, not gonna fight nobody's fight, right? But when it comes to protection of civilians, Russian militaries will do what they can. And also question is how long Russian military bases will stay there in Syria, and if you ask me, I would prefer Russian bases to be out, really, because Russian military personnel is risking their lives being presented there, right? And also because Russian military bases still are in Syria, that gives Ankara, Turkish leadership sort of leverage, because they can always speculate that it's them that are guaranteeing security of the Russian bases through their proxy regime in Damascus, right? And I don't like that. I don't want any country to have any even slightest leverage or something to say while negotiating about anything with the Russian side, right? So I think Russian bases should be out. This is my personal take, by the way. But if they're gonna stay there, they will do whatever they can to protect civilians if it comes to it. And they already demonstrated that, by the way. They saved thousands and thousands and thousands of lives, right? During recent rampage, recent barbaric terrorist attacks that happened in different parts of Syria, including in Latakia province. So this is my answer. Hopefully, you are satisfied with answer. And well, this is it for now, dear friends. Thank you all for joining the stream, for your attention. If you come across short clips from this live stream on my YouTube and Rumble channels, and if you have time, please like those videos also, and don't forget to click like button under this live stream. Maybe you can leave some commentary that will definitely help to deal with the algorithm. Once again, dear friends, thank you all for your attention, for joining the stream. Many thanks to all the members of our community who will watch this update later on. Have a wonderful day, great upcoming weekend, and take care. Bye for now.